Welcome back to Sip and Talk. We are really glad you're joining us today.
Yeah, great to be here. We're tackling something, well, pretty complex today.
Definitely complex. We're looking into those, really confusing but totally crucial geopolitical questions.
It is messy stuff, definitely.
Yeah.
But you kind of have to understand it. We're dealing with this, strange dynamic in global diplomacy.
How so?
Well, when we say China, that word, it pretty much represents the CCP-led government, right? The People's Republic of China.
Right. That's the usual meaning internationally.
But what does that word, that loaded word, really mean for everyone else? Especially, those people and governments with really deep historical connections to the whole region.
Exactly. It's not just about drawing lines on a map, is it? It gets into deep history, the structure of the modern state.
And how Beijing's image, which is growing so fast globally, impacts all its neighbors. Doesn't matter if they're allies or rivals.
The water is definitely deep here.
And the currents are strong. Yep.
They really are. So today, our mission here at Sip and Talk is to explore these critical dynamics. We're talking the ongoing trade wars, how the world actually sees China based on recent surveys.
Which is fascinating stuff.
And why this whole name game becomes such a high-stakes political thing in places like Taiwan.
Yeah, that name game is crucial.
And just to be super clear, we promise to be completely objective here. We're presenting the facts, the data, the context, no discrimination, no criticism.
Absolutely. Just laying it out.
Yeah.
Because the central puzzle here, the thing that makes a lot of people scratch their heads.
Yeah.
It's why people who are governed by the Republic of China, which is Taiwan, right, why they overwhelmingly prefer to call themselves just Taiwanese.
It seems simple, but it's not.
It's a decades-long identity shift. We really need to break that down.
It sounds confusing, maybe, but it actually reveals one of the most profound and, frankly, most democratic kind of revolutions happening in modern Asia.
That's a great way to put it.
So let's start unwrapping this now in today's session. Taiwan's great identity shift. Decoding China, Taipei, and the name game. Okay, let's dig into this movement. We're talking about a huge internal revolution, a complete transformation in how millions of people see themselves.
Yeah, and this identity struggle in Taiwan, it isn't new, right? It's this long, slow-motion pivot.
Away from what exactly?
Away from what historians sometimes call the greater China sentiment, this feeling of connection to the mainland.
Okay.
Toward a really localized, island-based consciousness.
Yeah.
A Taiwan-first identity.
And you're saying this pivot, it's measurable, we can actually track it.
Oh, absolutely. It's measurable, and it's deeply rooted in historical policy changes.
Yeah.
If you look at the timeline, say, from 1950 onwards, you see this really clear, almost mechanical shift.
So back in the 50s, 60s, 70s?
Right, from the 1950s to the 1980s. That was the long period of martial law under the KMT, the Kuomintang. Back then, the ROC, the Republic of China government in Taipei, they legitimately claimed to represent all of China. That was the official line.
Yeah, and the whole system, politics, education, media, it all reinforced one core identity. You were Chinese.
Right, because that was the era where the government in Taipei was basically waiting for the chance to retake the mainland, wasn't it?
Exactly.
So aligning your identity with that political goal, it just made sense for the ruling party back then.
Precisely. That was the political engine driving that initial identity. But things changed. Big time. Starting in the late 80s into the 90s. Democratization. Martial law was lifted, the political system opened up, and suddenly all these suppressed local histories, native languages like Taiwanese Hokkien or Hakka, unique cultural expressions, they started to bloom.
And is that when we start seeing that both category grow in the identity survey?
That's exactly when it happens. People couldn't necessarily deny their cultural roots, their ancestry, but now they had this new political reality, life on a democratic island. And that felt really distinct from those old mainland claims.
So the dual identity was kind of a bridge. Yeah, it was like a necessary compromise almost. People started identifying as both Taiwanese and Chinese.
Okay.
It let them hold on to their cultural heritage, language, food, family ties to the mainland, all that, while also acknowledging the political and geographic reality of where they lived, which was Taiwan, a democracy.
It's amazing how quickly that shifted again, though. Fast forward to the 2010s now.
Right.
We're past that initial messy transition. Democratic institutions are pretty solid, deeply consolidated, but cross-strait tensions with the PRC have really ramped up. What happens to that dual identity then?
It shrinks.
Yeah.
It really shrinks. The identity is purely Taiwanese, just Taiwanese. It keeps hitting record highs year after year.
So it's the mainstream now.
It's become the mainstream consensus.
Yeah.
And this, I think, is the fundamental insight. It's structural. The people have basically separated the political entity, the Republic of China, the ROC, from the cultural and geographic reality, which is Taiwan.
So they're essentially saying, this place, this island, this community, this is us, independent of the political framework that, landed there back in 1949.
Exactly. They've successfully formed this distinct Taiwan community consciousness. And this is critical because this consciousness, it's fundamentally independent of the PRC's definition of China.
It's an assertion of self-determination.
Totally. Based on shared experience, shared democratic values, shared geography.
And we don't have to guess about this. We have really good, consistent data, like from the National Tsinghua University Election Study Center, the NCCU.
Oh, yeah. The NCCU data is fantastic. They've tracked this identity trend for decades. It's incredibly valuable.
So what are the latest numbers telling us, like 2024?
The 2024 NCCU results are genuinely striking. They show the momentum is still really strong. Right now, 63.3% of the population identifies as purely Taiwanese.
Wow, over 63%.
And that's up 2.1% just from 2023. So it's not leveling off. It's an ongoing trend.
So what does that mean for the flip side? Identifying with mainland China, or that historical Chinese identity?
That identity is at a historical low. Just 2.4% identify as purely Chinese.
Only 2.4. That's tiny.
It's tiny, and it's been dropping steadily for years. And analysts point to two big reasons for this.
Which are?
One, Chinese military threats, the constant fighter jet incursions, the missile tests, the saber rattling.
Okay, that makes sense.
And two, the PRC's constant efforts to isolate Taiwan internationally, blocking them from the WHO, poaching diplomatic allies.
So when the only interaction feels hostile.
It pushes identity away.
Yeah.
Beijing's stick isn't working like a carrot, that's for sure.
Okay, so that leaves the both group, the ones still in the middle.
Right, the dual identity, both Taiwanese and Chinese. It's still significant. It's around 30.1%.
So who's typically in that group?
Well, it often includes older generations, people who actually came over with the KMT in 49, or maybe their kids.
Okay.
And also people with deep current economic ties to the mainland. Business people, maybe artists who work there.
People who need that connection.
Yeah, they might hold on to that cultural link for business reasons, or maybe just nostalgia.
But the real story, maybe the most important part, is the future, right? What are the young people saying? The ones who grew up entirely under democracy.
This is the data point that just fundamentally challenges Beijing's whole long-term strategy.
Yeah.
For the younger generation, say 18 to 35, the Taiwanese identity is just overwhelming. It exceeds 80%.
80%?
80%. This group, they have little or no memory of martial law. Their civic identity is entirely shaped by their democratic experience, their unique island life.
So for them, it's not even a conflict. They're just stating a fact about who they are.
Exactly. The KMT's original ideology, reunification, it's basically vanished among young people. It's replaced by this deeply entrenched local democratic identity.
And this structural shift, that's why this name game we're about to talk about is so charged.
That's exactly why. It's this big fight to make the world see them the way they see themselves, to align global perception with their democratic reality.
Okay, let's wade into this diplomatic minefield now.
Yeah.
Because for people outside of Asia, maybe watching the news or the Olympics, these terms, China, Taiwan, Chinese Taipei, they are just hopelessly confusing.
Totally confusing.
And we need to be really clear here. These aren't just like simple map labels. They are loaded. They represent sovereignty claims, they're used as political weapons, and often they're these really grudging compromises.
That's absolutely right. Huge political baggage. Let's start with the one that most people recognize internationally, China, spelled C-H-I-N-A, or he in characters.
Which, politically speaking, means?
Politically, China is the short form for the People's Republic of China, the PRC. That's the government in Beijing.
Okay.
It's the definition recognized by the UN, by almost every country in the world. And the PRC, they insist on the one China principle.
Right, we hear that phrase constantly. What exactly does that principle demand from other countries?
It basically demands three things if you want diplomatic relations with Beijing. Acknowledge there's only one China in the world, and it's the PRC.
Okay, one China?
Second, acknowledge that Taiwan is an inseparable, inalienable part of China.
Taiwan belongs to the PRC.
That's their claim. And third, you have to cut off all official diplomatic ties with the ROC government in Taipei. No ambassadors, no official recognition.
It's an all-or-nothing deal. Choose Beijing or choose Taipei, but you can't choose both officially.
Exactly. And this is where the massive confusion comes from for foreigners. If you grew up outside Asia, you probably just assume China means the PRC. Full stop.
Right.
You might be completely unaware that there's this other rival democratic government, the ROC, which historically claimed this same territory and still governs Taiwan and some smaller islands.
Okay, so that's China. Now the second term, Taiwan. T-A-I-W-A-N, or shot.
So Taiwan is the name the people living there use for themselves. It's the common geographical name everyone uses internationally.
Like the island itself.
Right, the island. And politically, it refers to the whole area, the jurisdiction, currently governed by that ROC government structure based in Taipei. It's the name of the place, the culture, the people.
The confusion here, though, is even when people use the name Taiwan, they often misunderstand its political status. Right?
Yes, precisely. A lot of people still view Taiwan through the PRC's lens. They see it as just a Chinese province, maybe a rebellious one. They don't grasp that subtle but really profound political distinction. Taiwan is fully self-governed. It's a vibrant, multi-party democracy operating completely outside the PRC's control.
So there's this gap in understanding the relationship between Taiwan, the place, and the ROC, the government.
Huge gap. Creates a massive diplomatic blind spot for many countries and individuals.
Okay, that finally brings us to the weirdest one. The political compromise designed just to let Taiwan show up internationally. Chinese Taipei.
Ah, yes. The ultimate diplomatic headache. This name, it's so confusing. It's used by Taiwan mostly for non-governmental international groups and big sports events. The Olympics are the most famous example.
It really is the purest example of this name game, isn't it?
It really is.
So why the specific kind of clunky name? Chinese Taipei.
Okay, so this name was basically engineered purely for participation. It sacrifices any assertion of sovereignty just to avoid getting kicked out immediately.
Just to get in the door.
Exactly. Its use goes back to the Nagoya Resolution in 1979. After the PRC got recognized by the International Olympic Committee, they needed a compromise so Taiwan wouldn't be totally excluded.
What was the deal?
The deal was Taiwan could still compete, but only if they used a name that implied they weren't a sovereign state, or at least a name that didn't directly challenge Beijing. And they couldn't use the ROC flag or anthem.
So it's deliberately ambiguous.
Totally ambiguous. Chinese refers to the cultural link, maybe. Taipei is just the capital city. It carefully avoids the key political terms, Republic of China, or even Taiwan.
Because if they insisted on Taiwan,
the PRC, citing the One China principle, would almost certainly use its global influence to block their participation entirely. Pressure the IOC, pressure host countries.
Wow. That feels incredibly humiliating for a functioning democracy. Having to use a name that sort of implies you belong to someone else just to run in the marathon or play basketball.
And that feeling of humiliation, that's exactly what fuels the internal rejection we talked about earlier.
Right, the identity shift.
Yeah, that growing local consciousness, especially among those 80+% of young people who identify as Taiwanese, they see Chinese Taipei as this obsolete, almost colonial-era relic.
It doesn't match their reality.
Not at all. It doesn't reflect the island's vibrant democracy. And that frustration is why you see such a fierce, ongoing push to use the name Taiwan in every international forum possible. It's a fight for dignity, for respect, for aligning how the world sees them with who they know they are.
Okay, so this internal identity shift in Taiwan, the strong push away from the Chinese label, it's not happening in isolation.
Not at all. It's definitely amplified by how the rest of the world views the People's Republic of China.
How so?
Well, Taiwan's push for a separate, distinct identity just looks much more reasonable, maybe even necessary, when the PRC's global image is, frankly, struggling in many parts of the world.
So let's look at the data on that. How is the PRC viewed globally?
The global sentiment is undeniably negative in a lot of key regions. Pew Research does great work on this. Their data from 2024, looking into 2025.
Yeah.
Across 25 surveyed countries, China's overall favorability rating is just a median of 36%, with 54% feeling actively unfavorable toward the country.
Oof, so more unfavorable than favorable.
Significantly more. And the data on leadership confidence, that tells a similar story, maybe even starker.
What does it say about Xi Jinping?
Confidence in Xi Jinping to do the right thing in world affairs is extremely low. Only 25% median confidence across those countries versus 66% expressing no confidence.
2/3 lack confidence.
Yeah. And furthermore, a big majority, 67% of global respondents, believe that China does not contribute to global peace.
Wow. That's a pretty damning assessment of their recent foreign policy.
It's a huge indictment, yeah. Actions in the South China Sea towards Taiwan, wolf warrior diplomacy.
Yeah.
It adds up.
And this negative view of the PRC, it contrasts pretty sharply with how Taiwan is seen, right? Taiwan seems to benefit from being the democratic underdog.
That's a really key factor. Taiwan's favorability median across 24 countries Pew surveyed hits 48%.
Higher than the PRC's 36%.
Definitely higher. It's not, universally beloved, but the difference is significant. It reflects that contrast people see. Taiwan focusing on liberal democracy versus Beijing's authoritarianism and military muscle flexing.
Now, this perception isn't the same everywhere, is it? There's a polarization. Where is the negative sentiment strongest?
Yeah, it's definitely polarized. The negative views are consistently highest in the high-income democracies. Think the U.S., Canada, Japan, South Korea, Australia, major EU countries like Germany, France, the UK.
Okay.
Negativity there usually runs between 60% and 80%. Really high.
And what's driving that?
It's mostly driven by values, deep concerns over human rights, what's happening in Xinjiang with the Uyghurs, the crackdown on democracy in Hong Kong.
Right.
Also, military expansionism, especially in the South China Sea, and the constant pressure on Taiwan. And then there are the ongoing economic issues, trade practices, intellectual property theft concerns.
So these are nations focused on things like universal values, rule of law, democracy. But the picture changes when we look elsewhere, like the developing world.
It shifts dramatically. Favorability has actually ticked up slightly in some middle and low-income countries, places in Africa, Latin America, parts of the Middle East.
Okay.
The median favorability there is maybe around 35%, sometimes higher. And this seems almost entirely linked to economic engagement.
The Belt and Road Initiative.
Belt and Road investments, yeah. Big infrastructure projects. Viewing China as a major economic power that offers loans or financing, often without the political strings like democracy or human rights conditions that sometimes come with Western aid.
This brings us to something interesting. The cognitive gap. If the global image is so poor, especially in places like the US and Europe, why might ordinary citizens inside mainland China be totally unaware of this? Or maybe they just don't believe it.
It's almost entirely structural. The biggest factor is information control. The famous Great Firewall.
Censorship.
Massive censorship. It rigorously filters international news media, BBC, CNN, New York Times, and blocks major social platforms like Google, X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, critical academic research, too.
So people just don't see the information that's driving negative opinions elsewhere, like reports on Xinjiang or Hong Kong?
Largely, no. They simply don't have easy access to it. They're not seeing the context that shapes global views.
Okay, what else?
Secondly, the official national narrative pushed by the state media and the party is extremely effective domestically. It's built on two main pillars.
Which are?
Pillar one, emphasize the huge economic achievements, the rising prosperity, the amazing infrastructure, lifting people out of poverty, the China success story.
Got it. Economic progress.
Pillar two, the narrative of the great revival of the Chinese nation. This story frames China's rise as finally overcoming a century of humiliation by foreign powers.
So if you're constantly told your nation is finally standing up, rising back to its rightful place, how do you interpret criticism from outside?
Well, the official media frames almost any criticism from the West, whether it's about trade, human rights, Taiwan, whatever, as basically one of three things.
Okay.
Either it's a malicious smear, just lies, or it's jealousy because China's succeeding, or it's the deliberate actions of hostile foreign forces trying to hold China down to suppress its inevitable rise.
So that narrative acts like a shield. It inoculates people against believing the criticism.
It really does. It reframes criticism as attack. And finally, there's that value gap we talked about.
Right, the developing world focus.
Yeah, the official media heavily highlights the countries, mostly in the global south, that praise China's economic partnership and emphasize non-interference in internal affairs.
So from inside China, it might look like most of the world approves.
Or at least that the countries that matter or are reasonable value China's economic help more than, say, Western lectures on democracy. This selective presentation of global opinion just widens that gap between how China sees itself and how much of the world, especially the democratic world, sees it. The complexities of pro-China voices in a democratic society.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how those global pressures and that deep internal identity divide create so much complexity within Taiwan itself.
Absolutely.
Because even with this huge democratic consensus shifting towards a Taiwanese identity, you still hear diverse voices, sometimes contradictory voices.
You do.
And because Taiwan is a democracy, those voices get heard. They're allowed to speak.
That's the messy beauty of an open democratic society, right? And we need to be able to kind of dissect the motivations behind these voices that sound pro-China but are coming from within this fiercely independent democracy.
Because it's rarely simple endorsement of the CCP, is it?
Almost never. It's often much more, well, utilitarian.
Right.
Or based on different priorities.
So what are the main drivers for these kinds of voices in Taiwan?
Well, one motivation is purely historical and cultural. You still have some people, often older, connected to that old soldier sentiment.
Ones who came over in 1949.
Right. The veterans themselves, or maybe their descendants, they may retain a really deep-seated affinity for traditional Chinese culture as they see it, and view the ROC in Taiwan as the true inheritor of that culture, distinct from the communist mainland.
Okay, so a historical cultural link.
Yeah.
What else?
And then there's the big one today, economic incentive.
Money.
Money, business, market access. This drives a lot of the softer line views you hear now. Individuals, maybe artists, entertainers, definitely business people, trade groups. If they rely heavily on mainland China for income for their market, they often adopt a more pragmatic, non-confrontational political stance. For them, keeping things stable and relatively friendly with Beijing is just crucial for their personal bottom line.
We actually have a perfect, though maybe controversial, case study for this. The influencer known as Guanchang, Chen Qihan.
Oh yeah, Guanchang. He's a huge figure. Famous fitness personality, very influential online.
And his public statements really highlight this tension between Taiwan's democracy, business interests, and political views on China.
They really do. He went on a visit to China and came back publicly praising aspects of their governance model.
What specifically?
He talked about economic achievements. He mentioned something called the Vegetable Basket Project. That's Beijing's initiative to keep prices stable for essential foods. He contrasted that favorably with Taiwan's then high inflation.
Okay, so praising economic stability. But he went further, didn't he? Made a really provocative claim about freedom.
Yeah, he did. He suggested, somewhat astonishingly, that governance in China was somehow more free. He actually said something like, they won't arrest people like Taiwan does.
Which is a wild claim, given China's surveillance state and lack of due process.
It's an extraordinary claim. But you have to see it in context. It functions less as a factual statement about China and more as a highly targeted critique of the current Taiwanese administration he opposes. He's leveraging this perception of mainland stability or efficiency to score political points domestically.
But here's the crucial contradiction, right? He praises parts of China, but he never says Taiwan should join it.
Never. That's the key.
Right.
Despite praising the mainland's economic management or whatever,
yeah,
he adamantly insists on keeping his Taiwanese nationality. He refuses to give up Taiwan's political subjectivity, its independence in practice.
So his stance is purely pragmatic, utilitarian.
That's exactly what it looks like. I'm economically attracted to the mainland's ability to do big things, to keep prices stable, maybe, but politically. He keeps clear reservations about actually merging with that system. He wants the economic benefits without the political cost.
I bet the public reaction in Taiwan to comments like that was intense.
Oh, immediate and intense. Huge backlash online.
Yeah.
People immediately questioned his real motives versus his potential business interest in China.
Right.
You saw these sarcastic comments online, like people telling him to prove China's democracy by doing things that would get you instantly arrested there, like live streaming a critique of Xi Jinping in Tiananmen Square.
That kind of dark humor, that sarcasm, it's almost like a defense mechanism, isn't it? It highlights the critical thinking, the information literacy needed to evaluate these voices.
It really is. And the takeaway here is important. These voices, they're allowed in a democracy. They have freedom of speech. But they should be critically scrutinized by the public.
You have to ask the context.
You have to ask, is this praise based on a full factual picture? Or is it influenced by personal gain, business deals, market access, sponsorships? Does it conveniently omit crucial facts like censorship or human rights issues in China? Democracy allows the speech, but it demands critical listening from its citizens.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit now. Moving from identity politics inside Taiwan to the huge global economic picture. Because this U.S.-China trade contest, it forces everybody else, especially key U.S. allies like South Korea and by extension Taiwan, into this incredibly difficult geopolitical balancing act.
It really is the defining feature of the global economy right now. And we've been watching the U.S. slowly, steadily turn away from that high tide of free trade that really marked the 90s and early 2000s, the post-Cold War era.
Right, the globalization peak.
Exactly. This shift towards protectionism, preferring tariffs, wanting domestic production. It's actually been a bipartisan trend in the U.S. for maybe the last 15 years or so.
Really? Bipartisan?
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Both major U.S. parties have, at different times, walked away from big free trade deals. Remember the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership? Both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump disavowed it during the 2016 election.
Huh. Good point. But the approach under, say, a potential Trump 2 administration, it feels different, more aggressive, maybe, than earlier protectionism.
It does feel distinct, yeah.
Right.
Because it seems to approach trade not just as an economic tool, but almost as, like, moral or political score settling.
How so?
Well, economists sometimes call it the 1890s approach. It really emphasizes high tariff walls, demanding strict reciprocity, you tax us, we tax you the same.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to operate outside the established rules, like the World Trade Organization, the WTO. And it fundamentally views trade deficits not just as an economic statistic, but as a literal sign that other countries are ripping America off.
And this creates a real problem, a dissonance for U.S. allies, doesn't it? You'd think a close security ally like South Korea or Japan would get treated better on trade.
You would think so, but that's not the core philosophy here. The underlying belief seems to be that unbalanced trade relationships and unbalanced alliances are basically the same problem, two sides of the same coin, meaning the view is that allies, maybe Germany, Korea, Japan, have exploited the U.S. in two ways. First, by getting easy access to the huge American consumer market for their exports. And second, by underspending on their own defense, because they can rely on American security guarantees, the U.S. military umbrella.
So in this view, an ally is essentially getting an economic free ride and a military subsidy at the same time.
That seems to be the perspective, yeah. And it creates massive friction for countries that have had security treaties with Washington for decades and naturally assumed it came with, reasonably friendly trade terms. It makes negotiating incredibly tricky.
And the whole negotiating landscape with the U.S. sounds much more fragmented now compared to maybe previous administrations, like navigating a maze.
It really does. I mean, during the first Trump administration, the U.S. Trade Representative, USTR, was pretty much the central player, the main point of contact.
Right.
Today, analysts expect a much less predictable policy process. It might involve multiple agencies, sometimes with conflicting goals. Trade partners might have to deal with USTR and the Commerce Department and maybe the Treasury Department, all potentially pulling in slightly different directions based on domestic politics or bureaucratic turf wars.
That confusion must create huge uncertainty for major trading partners like South Korea. Let's look at their response, though. They came up with this pretty ingenious strategy using investment, right? MAZSA.
MASA. Yeah, that stands for Make American Shipbuilding Great Again. It was brilliant, really.
What was the strategy?
Well, South Korea saw the U.S. focus on reindustrialization, bringing manufacturing back, and also concerns about military readiness. So they framed this initiative not just as, please don't hit us with tariffs, but as a strategic partnership offer.
Okay.
It involved proposing a massive investment, like $150 billion into the U.S. maritime sector, shipbuilding specifically, by big South Korean companies, the K-Balls.
Wow, $150 billion is a huge sweetener. What was the goal of framing it that way?
The goal was to change the narrative.
Yeah.
To position Korea not as a trade problem, but as a key partner in America's manufacturing renaissance. Look, Korea is the world's #2 shipbuilder, right after China, so their argument was powerful. We have the expertise. We can help you rebuild your industrial base. We can help you get the modern military and commercial ships you need quickly. This is a national security win for you, America.
So they're basically saying, we can fill a critical gap for you. Help the U.S. Navy, help commercial shipping, and transfer skills and revitalize American shipyards at the same time. Like Korean companies buying and modernizing the old Philly shipyard.
Exactly. It's a masterclass in turning a potential threat, high tariffs, into a strategic industrial opportunity. And frankly, it's the kind of move that highly open economies like Korea or Taiwan almost have to make these days.
And that necessity brings us right back to the balancing act. South Korea is deeply connected to both the U.S. and China. How have they managed that pivot in terms of trade dependence?
The recalibration has been really quite aggressive. If you look back, say, 5 or 10 years, Korea's exports to China were nearly double what they sent to the U.S. Huge dependence on China.
Right.
But over the last few years, partly because of trade friction, partly geopolitics, they have worked hard to diversify. By 2024, their exports were almost perfectly balanced. China got about 19.5%, and the U.S. got about 18.7%.
That's a rapid shift, almost neck and neck now.
Very rapid. And it holds a crucial lesson. For a nation like Korea, where trade makes up something like 80 or 90% of their GDP, meaning they absolutely live or die by global trade, what's the key takeaway?
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Pretty much. Interdependence is unavoidable in today's world. But overdependence on any single country, especially a huge one whose strategic interests might not always align with yours.
Like China for South Korea or Taiwan.
Exactly. That leaves you strategically vulnerable, exposed to economic pressure, economic coercion. So Korea, Taiwan, other open economies, they have to constantly work to diversify their trade relationships, their investment flows, to build resilience against shocks. Supply chain vulnerability and economic coercion.
That need for resilience really hammers home the point. Nowadays, economic policy is national security policy. They're totally intertwined.
Completely.
And speaking of economic strategy, we should probably look a bit more critically at that protectionist approach itself. You hear analysts arguing that the heavy focus on tariffs is actually rooted in, well, basic economic illiteracy.
That's a very common critique, especially in academic and economic circles. Yeah. The core idea that just slapping a higher tariff on goods from a rival country automatically makes your country better off is seen as really short-sighted.
Why? What's the counter-argument?
Well, economists point out pretty simply that a tariff is just a tax. Someone has to pay it.
Right.
Either it's paid by American consumers who see higher prices on imported goods like TVs or shoes.
Okay.
Or, maybe even more often, it's paid by American businesses that import intermediate inputs, components, parts, materials they need to assemble their own final products here in the U.S.
So it raises costs for U.S. manufacturers, too.
Exactly. It can actually stunt domestic growth and make U.S. companies less efficient, less competitive globally. It's not a simple win.
And meanwhile, China has shown it's perfectly capable of wielding economic coercion, too, often with more surgical precision, right? Which brings us back to that classic example. Rare earth minerals.
Oh, the rare earths wake-up call. That was stark and painful for many Western countries.
What happened there?
China used export controls on rare earth minerals. These elements, essential for everything from smartphones and EVs to advanced military tech like fighter jets and missile guidance systems. They first restricted exports to Japan back in the early 2010s during a diplomatic dispute. Later, they threatened broader controls. It really demonstrated their ability to weaponize their dominant position in the supply chain for these critical materials.
And this dependency wasn't exactly a secret, was it? Why wasn't it fixed sooner?
Well, the dependency was known, yeah, but fixing it is profoundly hard. It's a tough problem.
Why? Are rare earths actually rare?
Not really. That's the irony. The minerals themselves are found lots of places globally. The bottleneck is the processing. Refining and separating these minerals is technically complex, requires huge amounts of energy, and can be environmentally really messy.
And China had cornered that market.
China had invested heavily and established near-total global dominance in the refining and processing stages. Breaking that dominance requires massive long-term investment in new facilities, developing new, cleaner technologies, sorting out regulations, and Austin, it needs cooperation between multiple countries.
So it was just deemed too hard or too expensive until the crisis hit.
Pretty much. It was easier to just keep buying from China until the strategic risk became undeniable. The failure to address that dependency taught everyone a brutal lesson. Relying on a potential adversary for critical inputs is a major national security vulnerability.
And the landscape has changed now, hasn't it? Economic coercion isn't just a China tool anymore.
Absolutely. The new reality is that economic and technological coercion is now very much a two-way street. Both the U.S. and China have developed a whole toolkit of coercive measures.
Like what?
The U.S. now uses aggressive export controls, especially targeting cutting-edge semiconductors and the equipment needed to make them, trying to slow China's advance in AI and supercomputing. They restrict investment flows, screen technology transfers.
And China's response?
China counters. They've imposed their own export controls on key minerals needed for chips like gallium and germanium. They use targeted market access restrictions, regulatory hurdles for foreign firms, anti-dumping duties. It's this ongoing, technologically sophisticated contest fought with economic weapons.
Okay, let's wrap up this trade part by connecting it back to technology and strategy, specifically looking again at South Korea. What's their digital strategy for the future in this environment?
Korea's playing it smart. They're positioning themselves cleverly in the global AI race. They know they probably can't beat the U.S. on creating the huge foundational AI models, like GPT-4.
Right, the U.S. has the lead there.
But they're focusing on a potentially lucrative niche, physical AI, applying AI in the real world, in industry. And they're leveraging their existing strengths, amazing digital infrastructure, a highly skilled workforce.
And something else, right? Something unique.
And their data. This is the key value proposition. They aim to combine those breakthrough foundational AI models coming out of the U.S. with their own massive, decades-long accumulation of manufacturing data.
Data from their big industry.
Exactly. Think about their huge industrial clusters.
Yeah.
Shipbuilding, heavy chemicals, automotive manufacturing, semiconductors. They have incredible amounts of real-world operational data.
And that data can be used to train AI for.
For making those industries smarter, more efficient, better predictive maintenance, optimizing production lines, designing new materials. That specific granular industrial data is something the U.S. tech giants often lack. Korea sees it as their secret sauce for physical AI applications.
That makes sense. Industrial data as the key differentiator.
It is, and you see it in action, like the massive collaboration between SK Hynix, a Korean tech giant, and Amazon Web Services.
Yeah.
They're planning this enormous AI data center complex, potentially scaling up to 1 gigawatt of power.
1 gigawatt, that's huge.
It's huge. And this investment isn't just about raw computing power. It signals this deep industrial and technological integration between key security allies, the U.S. and Korea, trying to ensure that the democratic world maintains its edge and resilience in critical technologies like AI. Wow. We have really covered a huge amount of ground today, haven't we?
We really have, from, the deeply personal shift in identity happening on a dynamic island like Taiwan.
Right, that move towards Taiwanese consciousness.
All the way to the massive global trade contest where the names you use and where your supply chains run can dictate the price of international dignity and security.
It really all converges, doesn't it? That internal consensus in Taiwan, over 63% saying they're purely Taiwanese, it's fundamentally a democratic demand. A demand for global recognition that pushes back hard against that confusing, politically forced ambiguity of terms like Chinese Taipei.
Yeah, this profound, very personal identity shift is playing out against this backdrop of a hyper-volatile global trade environment, an environment where names, where security alliances, where economic dependencies carry just immense geopolitical weight.
Well, we really hope this session of Sip and Talk has given you, our listeners, the objective facts and the context you need to form your own assessment. As we always try to do, our aim is just to lay out the dynamics, identity, perception, trade, and give you the tools to think critically about it all.
So here's the final thought we want to leave you with today. In this world that seems increasingly dominated by two superpowers, the U.S. and China, and facing this highly bifurcated global economy, how does a smaller, highly open trading nation, whether it's Taiwan, South Korea, or others, maintain its sovereignty, its national identity, without sacrificing its economic lifeblood?
It's the fundamental question, isn't it? It's the tightrope walk that practically every democratic nation on the periphery of these giants is facing right now.
Definitely something to chew on.
Well, we've loved having this deep conversation with you all today. If you want to keep up with our analyses and maybe our occasional thought experiments,
please remember to subscribe to Sip and Talk wherever you get your audio.
Yeah, hit that subscribe button.
And hey, before you go, don't forget our old friend Mickey. Check out his YouTube channel. It's called Mickytolife.
Oh, yeah, Mickey.
You know, Mickey, he's got the hilarious memes, the great liquor tasting reviews, always fun. And he's got his latest Europe travel vlog up too, Mickytolife on YouTube.
Definitely check him out. All right, we'll catch you next time on Sip and Talk.